All right, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for this month's CloudBytes, a Sage Intacct educational series hosted by Dean Dorton. Many of you attending today probably already know our software services manager, Tabitha Schmaltz. Last month at Sage Transform, she presented several standing room only sessions, so we're really excited to have her here today. Over the next hour, she'll be letting us in on all the secrets of using custom fields and dimensions in Sage Intacct for reporting. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please use the Q&A icon to ask. We'll be monitoring the questions throughout the sessions, and we'll make sure to share them with Tabitha at the end during the Q&A period. If we don't get to your question today during the session, contact information will be included at the end of the session and also in the follow-up email. This webinar is being recorded, so you'll receive a link to the recording and the slides in the follow-up email as well. Again, thank you so much for joining us today, and please don't hesitate to ask questions. I know there's a lot of great info to cover, so I'll go ahead and turn it over to Tabitha.
Thanks, Nikki. All right, well, welcome everyone to the March 2024 CloudBytes with Dean Dorton. Today we're going to be discussing impactful reporting using customizing custom fields, and we're going to customize our dimensions using that. I know you guys are a lot of busy people and you have a lot of options for learning great features inside of Sage Intacct. I'm really grateful that you chose to hang out with me today. I always love to be a good steward of your time, so let's just make sure this is a good session for you. What would make it a good session? First, if you have clients or maybe you're a client yourself and your accounting might be rather simple, but what you need to get out of the system may need to be more detailed or more focused. Or maybe you have a desire to create really strong financials, maybe using a lot of imagery, some flexibility. We want to stretch Sage Intacct and use those dimensions a little bit more. Or maybe you're actually someone who has a CEO or another upper level management that really likes to poke their head in at the last minute and ask for an update to that really complicated report that you built last week, but they need it right now. So if that's you, you're probably in the right space. This session's meant to be more of an intermediate session. So the hope is that everybody on the call today is already pretty familiar with the financial report writer and how to produce items like dimension groupings. So if you don't follow those pieces or you have questions on those, we'll need to cover those in a different session. We will cover, though, how we can stretch our dimensions and add custom fields to many windows inside of Sage Intacct. We're going to cover how to create tabs to help organize that data and make it more user-friendly and easy to find. And then we're going to produce a few financial reports that use what we built. Sound like a plan? We're going to jump into a story to help paint the picture of how we can use Sage Intacct here. And we're going to work with a fictional account that's called Arundel Ice. So Arundel Ice is an American Hockey League franchise, and they approached us looking to expand their current Sage Intacct system. At the time of the meeting, they were in their honeymoon stages of a new Sage Intacct implementation, and they were looking to secure a new sponsor for their league. In order to secure that sponsor, they needed to provide some reporting that would justify the additional funds that were requested. So like most sports arenas, on any given night, they could have many different events happening in the space. So they needed to be able to show what events were taking place and which were actually profitable. This included reports by events, genre of music for concerts, regular season versus divisional playoff games, and even which opponents for when the arena became a basketball stadium. And it seemed like the list of what needed to be tracked continued to grow by the minute. Although the list was really long, Arundel actually felt like their accounting was really simple. They kept a 4-digit chart of accounts. And so since they weren't using any subs, they figured this was going to be a very straightforward request. The decision was made to use dimensions to track the information that was needed. Since we didn't want to track all of the data every single time a line item was selected, but rather wanted to be able to analyze the data entered with details behind the scenes, like the type of events or specific information that was relevant, it was decided that we would use custom fields to help capture additional data. Okay, so we're going to start focusing a little bit more on how we're using that. But before we get too much further, I just want to challenge you to start thinking about custom fields. If you're not currently using them, what are some areas that you could be using them? And go ahead and feel free to scribble those down on a piece of paper as we go. So we should all already be familiar with what dimensions are and how Sage has more than 10 dimensions in the standard product. We can use those dimensions on every single transaction inside of the product, and we're able to change the terminology to make the software more familiar to your client's industry and internal needs. Dimensions alone are great for taking big swings at your data to help create some natural silos. To find more details without resorting to additional fields on every single transaction, we look to use custom fields. These are part of core, so there's not any additional add-on fees, there's no additional modules needed, and you're also able to add custom fields to many of the windows inside of the system. A typical dimension will capture your name and the ID, but the custom field is going to capture much more data. So for those of you that custom dimensions is something new, or custom fields are new rather, let's talk about how we could relate to those. So a quick example would be if you were a dimension, your social security number might be your ID and your name would be your dimension name, right? But the custom fields would track all of your personal demographics. What's your favorite ice cream flavor? Whether you opt to receiving a birthday card each year. So it's items that you don't necessarily want to be able to select on every single transaction, but it's still very relevant to what that dimension is. Make sense? Custom fields can either exist on a specific dimension, like I was just describing, or they can also be on the header of a record, like a journal entry or an AP or AR bill. So when we use them on a dimensional value, this is when we're able to house many additional attributes and essentially bring the data to life and provide more touch points for a query. So, every one of these items that we add in here is something else that we can query the system on to pull additional data. Like if you're one of those, give me all the details, this is where you're going to be living. Now, if you don't want to tie that additional field specifically to the dimensional data, you can use the header to keep track of additional pieces of information as well. So a common way that we've seen this used is by adding a simple checkbox to a vendor record to determine whether they have their W-9 on file, which would then be housed inside of the attachments. Sage Intacct also encourages companies to rename dimensions in order to make them more familiar. So while this isn't necessarily related to our custom field itself, it will be relevant for our demonstration. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the terminology. So when we have the ability to change the name of what we call something, it helps the system to become familiar and helps to foster the adoption of the system, since users are seeing familiar terms. Renaming terms is very easy, and I'll show you how that works. And we simply would work inside of the terminology section inside of settings. And this is where we can change something from saying customer to saying client, or from saying dimension to saying cost segment. And we'll show you a couple examples of this as well. So I'm going to jump into a live demo, or actually that's going to be just a second, sorry. Next, we created a custom fields window inside of Intacct. This is the next customization here. And we created a few fields and tabs. The tabs were created to segregate the fields into groups by types of events. And we'll show you that in the live demo. The fields were created and additionally to give differing details about each event type. So we're going to be working inside of platform services and custom fields. If you do not have custom services on your dropdown, you may have something that says customization services. You can follow the same dialog for those options as well. If you see neither of these, check with your admin to just make sure you have proper permissions. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into a live demo here. So we are going to be working inside of Arendelle. I'm already logged into our live environment. And to satisfy the requirements of the ICE organization, we needed to create some additional fields. So I'm going to come in here to our company. And the first thing I want to show you is under the setup, we have our terminology. I'm going to make this just a little bit bigger here. So inside of terminology, this is where we made our first change. So we took our classes, which is a normal dimension that's available to everybody on the call, and we made a change to class to change it from class and classes to event and events. So this is the way that we're able to track additional, make events very obvious to everybody what we're working with. I'm going to actually just go here over to our events, and I'm going to view our concert here for Bruno Mars. And you'll see that we have some tabs across the top. So this may look a lot different than what you're normally used to seeing for your class dimension. So the first thing we did is we created a tab for each of our sports, concert, and family, as those are the different types of events that were being tracked and reported on by the arena accountants. We also created a pick list field, which would show us, I'm going to click edit here to show you that these are pick list fields, to show us the event type. So we can see if this is a concert, family, other sports. So that way we can use this for querying. We also put other in here just as a quick way to allow for future expansion. So if somebody was recording a a new event, putting a new event in the system, and they didn't fall under a concert, family, or sport, it didn't cause immediate panic. Okay, so we could capture that as well. Finally, we created an event date here as well. So this allows us to create some event-based reporting based on that date and the dates that the event took place. Now, one common question I get is, using the event date versus the GL date, why would we utilize a new date? Sometimes we have events or transactions that take place outside of the GL posting period. So we might be having, we might say we want to see all of the events that happened inside of June, but the expenses for that event might have been taking place for a whole year as we're setting up for that event. So you can query based on when the actual expenses were incurred, or you can incur or take a look at when the event took place. Now, one of the reporting requirements for ICE was to also get income statements by event and event type, comparing and contrasting the profitability of those different events. So to be able to accomplish that, we needed to create some custom fields at the event type to allow us to distinguish the subtypes of those events. So if we keep working in this field, we actually created some additional tabs. So I'll show you how to create these as well, but the sports tab is the first one. So this sports tab here, we created sections for each of the types of sports and sporting events that occur. Because not only is the Iceplex Arena home to the Arendelle Ice franchise, but it also the local university is playing their basketball games here. And from time to time, they have some additional special sporting events that are taking place. So with that in mind, we created the sports tab that houses the information for both hockey and basketball. We also added just a general spot at the bottom to capture the type of sports if we happen to have those basketball, hockey, or volleyball events that were taking place. On the hockey field, we also added a few additional pieces of information. We added, what type of event this was, as well as who our opponent was, so we could keep track of when things were more profitable by opponent. Also, if there was specific seasons we were tracking or a specific type of tournament. You also see here I added a checkbox for when these were playoff games. Under concert, we just did this really simply. We added a music genre so we could keep track of the type of music and the artist, whether this was a duo, if it was a multiple group, a solo act. And then lastly, we have our family tab. This one we use to keep track of like our on ice events, if it was a stage event, and then who that was an event for. So was it Marvel, was it Disney, was it a Sesame Street or whatnot? So just ways that we could capture additional data. Okay. Now to build these, we did do this inside of, again, platform services. We went to custom fields and we could click that plus. Remember Sage Intacct, it says that pluses are literal pluses, that's adding new. And when we created these transactions or these additional fields, I'm going to go ahead and click edit on one of these. We select the object that we're extending, which in this case is our class object. Now here's something that's really tricky about this. Event is class, we retermed it, right? So, but when we change that terminology, Sage Intacct still has it be class in the background. It doesn't change the name of the field inside of Sage Intacct, only what we see, which means on this dropdown, when I'm looking for event, it is not going to be in the E's for event. It's going to be in the middle of the C's for class. So do pay attention to what you're changing the terminology to so you know where to look for it in the objects. Next, if I come over here, we're choosing what type of data field we're selecting. So this, I chose a pick list, but you can see you have lots of options here. So you could have selected a checkbox, a date, an email, which would check for formatting of that email. You could also have multi-pick lists as well as single pick lists or text boxes, lots of options. Then I'm going to go ahead and click next here on our pick list, and then we have the ability to add in all of our pick list values. Now you can type these in however you'd like, but do remember that this does not have spell check. It's not going to proper case your information. However you enter it is exactly how your users will see it. And you can make a determination whether the first value is a default and whether you'd like the list to sort alphabetically or in the order provided. So those are some great fields that are there as well. Now, one thing I would add is there's a description down here at the bottom. In this event, it's blank, but I highly encourage you to always add descriptions into why you're creating those fields. Just because if you pass this work on to somebody else, or I love to live under the pretense that we're all going to win the lottery this afternoon, right, and not show up for work tomorrow. So we want somebody who's taking over our work when we don't come into work tomorrow to be able to understand what this field was used for and take care of that for you. The last piece here is going to tell you, is where we tell the system whether the field is going to be required or if it can be skipped, whether it's hidden, which means we wouldn't have it visible on the card or the transaction when it's there. And there are some specific cases where you might use a hidden field. If you need to inactivate it, you could check that box as well. And then where does it appear? So I've said that I want it to appear in basketball. So this is going to be the tab. And then we say where that tab is going to appear, and it's going to be on sports. So you can pick these two pieces. If you need a new tab, you would just simply type that in here to provide that new tab and create that for the system. And then click save. All right, let's go ahead and jump back into our presentation. And actually, I guess before we go too much further, Nikki, was there any questions at this point?
I don't see any questions yet, but everyone definitely feel free to drop those in the Q&A if you have them. All right, so we continue to build out all of those remaining tabs. So like I showed you, we created that music genre field with the values for country, pop, and rock, R&B, bluegrass, whatever would be relevant. We also created the artist type where the arena accountant could track whether the act was a solo artist, duo, group, etc. Now, when we combine these two fields with the event type field and the event date field, the accountants are able to produce financials by genre and by type with very little additional effort. That family type, again, I mentioned this before, but we used it for the on ice, circus, stage, family label.
we're able to track all that and also be able to track the vendor that it was underneath, such as Disney, Marvel, or even the Ringling Brothers. The fields and the capabilities of the Sage Intacct financial statements are all that the Arundel I staff needed to show any potential investors or current investors, owners, or other executives exactly what is making the team money or is not financially profitable. Questions like how much does it cost for us to change out the floor when we move from a hockey event to a basketball event, or from a basketball event to a dirt track motor race, or from the dirt track race back to a country music concert stage? Are we making more money on hockey opponents that are closer in geographic proximity, or do we make more money from well-known opponents? Is hockey more profitable than basketball? Should we renegotiate the contract with the local university basketball team because now we have proof that they don't bring in as much revenue as they claim? Or maybe can we negotiate better deals with some of our diva rock stars now that we know exactly what our profitability is from their concerts and whether it's as high as it is with other stars? Which music genre brings in the highest profit? How can we get more of those acts into the arena? All of these questions can now be answered by the Arundel ICE ownership thanks to the Intacct financial reporting system. So as we talk about these things, I'm hoping you're still keeping those wheels turning and writing down some examples that you could use. So crafting a set of financials inside of the Sage Intacct cloud accounting software is as easy or easier than any other system on the market today. Dimensions are the core of the software and really give the financials power and flexibility. So let me show you what we mean by that. So we're going to jump into another live demo. All right, so under the General Ledger tab here, we're going to go to the financial reports. Now, a lot of you I know are probably going to reports and then going into your report center here. That's also a way that you can come in and then click new report. So whatever you're most comfortable with, old habits die hard. I still go through the General Ledger tab. But we're going to go in here and we're going to create a new report. So new report and new financial report. And we're going to actually build a report based on like a traditional P&L format. So we have some options here. One that I'm going to encourage you to take a look at is the report structure. We do have the ability to make determinations on whether we want to create an account-based financial report or a dimension-based financial report. So the difference here is whether we're going to have our accounts going down the side of the report with our periods across the top, or dimensions down the side with our account groupings across the top. So these are two different ways that we can look at the same types of data and also have the ability to filter on the rows. So play around with this, you could get some really fun reporting. For today's purposes, we're just wanting a traditional P&L format for the rows. So we're going to choose the default, which is the accounts. And I'm going to go ahead and just title this March 2024 CloudBytes. And then we're going to go to rows. So inside of the rows, we're going to select our account groups. You probably are familiar with how we create account groups already, but I'm going to just go ahead and select a nice easy one called net income. And we're going to include that in our report. This account group is going to already have compiled all of the parts and pieces that we need for our P&L. So this is where we would have all that housed. And I'm going to go ahead and move that over here. And so the next thing that we wanted to do is that we are going to format our columns. And we're going to talk a little bit about that functionality with the account dimensions that we talked about before. So before I get too far, I'm going to come here and I'm going to show you that there's a dimension structure inside of the column. So this allows us the ability to dynamically process the dimension values based on the transactions that are inside of the system. And we want to be able to expand or filter the data based on the information that we're seeing here. All right, so how do we get these dimension structures? I'm going to create a duplicate tab. And I'm going to actually go into our general ledger, go into reports, go into dimension groups. And we're going to go to event. So our dimension groups and our dimension structures are somewhat related. So I'm going to show you how you can create one dimension structure from your dimension group and be able to update them together. So we created several of these. You could see I have a whole bunch of them in here. We won't visit all of them, but I'm going to go ahead and open up this all concert, for example. So what we did is we created an event group, and we said we wanted to be where all members have are sorted by event ID, and we want it where the event type, which is one of our fields that's on here, equals concert. So anytime I had an event that was created and it fell into their concert grouping, I wanted it to come into this group. And then if I say dimension structure as well, this will create both. Now, if you're saying, well, what's the difference between a group and a structure? I kind of say that like a group is just a pool. So it's going to allow us to filter data into like a bucket. A structure is like it sounds, it gives structure to that group. So it allows you the ability to split them out and still keep them separated instead of more homogeneous where it's mixed together and you're not able to identify what's what. So if you do not select dimension structure, the group will only be used for filtering purposes, not for expansion purposes. So we always select that, and then we can click save. And what that will do is it'll create both that dimension group and the dimension structure. So we went through and did this for each of our concerts, family, sports, all of our family sections, our concerts, etc. So you want to create these event groups or dimension groups for whatever your structures are. All right. So we can come in here and we're going to say that we want to come in here. We're going to select our event. And we're going to say that we want to do all types. I'm going to just say event all types for this one here. And I'm going to say OK. And then we could decide if we want to expand by something. So I have the ability to expand by event. So this is a way that I could say I want it to be a pool of all of my events that happen, but then I want to actually separate out each event so I'm able to see them. All right. So then we have the ability to add some filters on here, computations. It will always default as of today's date, but I can put some prompts on here if we want to put some additional filters. So depending on what you're needing, you know, we have a lot of flexibility here. Format is going to include any titling if you want to change the way that the report looks, any kind of font differences, etc. You have all those in here as well. And then don't forget permissions. Some of you on this call may have a default permission to allow everyone access to your reports. And some of you may have other permissions that would basically put everyone on the exclusion list and you'd have to give access to those reports. Just pay attention to what those look like if you need to roll out a report. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and save this report. And let's go ahead and run this report. Oh, of course I ran it. They must have done something wrong on my report. I'm going to actually open this one up that I created previously. So we had net income here. We're going to just double check our columns here just in case I messed up a group. We have our dimension, all types, and we're actually going to expand by dimension structure. In this case, we did it one level down, but you also could expand by events if you wanted to. And we're going to preview this report. Oh, I don't have any data. For some reason, it's not coming in. I apologize. There we go. There just wasn't any data today. So if we ran this report as of 2023, I'm able to see all of our family events, all of our concerts, all of our sports, and all of our everything added together. And I'm able to see all of our net income right here down the side. Now, again, remember anything that's blue inside of Sage Intacct is a hyperlink. So I do have the ability to drill down to any of these transactions to be able to see the general ledger detail and drill down as far as I need to answer any questions. Now, the result of this, being able to click those groups and add them into the report, make those adjustments, is that typically in less than 5 minutes, the Arendelle I staff would be able to create a new financial report using the tools that they've already created. They're already available in the system. And then as the staff accountants enter new transactions and choose the correct event dimensions, the financials will automatically populate and appropriate reports and columns will have the appropriate data in real time. So they don't have to kick it out to a spreadsheet anymore. There's no more manual work, no more late night analysis at work because the boss just has to have that financials for the meeting first thing in the morning. It's just business as usual. We're just able to create those reports. And jump back into. Now, this isn't something that is just for the sports arena. I know most of you on the call likely don't have sports arena issues in your office today, but the idea of custom fields and expanding your reporting based on those custom fields is industry agnostic. So you likely have been scribbling some ideas. Hopefully you have some ideas on those custom fields, but let me show you a couple other industry examples that we have here at Dean Dorton. Dean Dorton has a really strong presence in the equine space in Kentucky. So as such, one of the really fun fields that I've had a chance to work on is the equine in the equine world, where we have breeding and track horses, and that's a really strong use case for custom fields on dimensions. So what you can see here is what we first is a way that we've been able to expand, again, the class dimension. You're not limited to class, but it's what we used here as well. And we expanded the class dimension to be able to house equine specific transactions. So you can see we first changed the terminology from a class to horse. So it says horse information. And that helps the dimension make a whole lot more sense to their accounting team. They're also needing to allocate costs like feed and income like purse winnings to these horses. And sometimes expenses might come before the horse is even born. So to keep track of things like who the dam or sire is of these horses, those are the parents for those of us that were unfamiliar, which was totally me before I came here, as well as the year that the horse was born. The physical location can also be captured here. We have like a physical location in the US, but this is not to be all inclusive. We could also include things like purchase date, sell dates, maybe the horse's purpose, and other information that would allow for really strong reporting for those groups. We're able to provide our team reports based on specific breeding groups, maybe see all costs for the horses born in the same year, or split out revenue by stallions kept only in a certain physical location. So hopefully you have a couple ideas there that you have. I know that was a lot of information. Hopefully it's gotten some wheels turning on ways that you can use a custom field or two to help bring more life to your data and in turn improve your financial reporting. So if you've written out a couple pieces of data that can be captured, we can talk about how you can get those into your system right away. So if you wrote those down, I challenge you to actually add those custom fields on your own to your system. So again, you'd be looking for that platform services or customization services and custom fields, and then you could start creating those custom fields. And if you have a long list, maybe start with one or two just to get your feet wet. I really like the idea of using the check boxes in a lot of places just to say, did we do something or did we capture something? Check the box. So I really would challenge you to add those on your own. If you need additional assistance in order to do that, there's two places that you could go to right away, which would be the help and support in the top right-hand corner, and also checking out Sage University. You also always have the opportunity to ping the Dean Dorton team at ERP support at DDAF Tech, and we're happy to help walk you through how to add those updates to your system. Now, don't forget the ways to set to keep that information all organized, which would be by creating those additional tabs to keep the information segmented. But you can also add sections on the same page. Finally, use those fields to create custom structures. Use filters. Go and say when the event ID equals something, or when the checkbox that I created is populated to be checked. So you can actually look at those pieces of data and all the filter options. You can also stack filtering. So you could say when the checkbox is checked and the ID equals something else. So stack this together and get really creative in how you filter the data for groupings or for structures. Okay, and then actually once you've done those structures, use them, put them into your reports, and find new ways that you can stretch that data and report differently. All right, Nikki, any questions at this point?
We did have some questions come up.
Perfect.
So in reference to the net income report for Arundel ICE, do the events get added at the transaction level?
That's a good question. So yes, like let's say you had revenue that was coming in, or if you had expenses that you were incurring, class would be on the line level. So you were either selecting that class on an AP bill. You might be, if you had like an invoice that you were sending off, you might have selected class on that AR order entry transaction. It also could be a journal entry. It could be part of an allocation. So however you're capturing that data, you would just basically select the event itself, but the filtering to put it onto a group or to get it where you needed to on that net income group would happen behind the scenes, whether it fell into one of those reporting buckets for those dimension structures.
Great, thank you. Another question that we had was, what is the email address for additional questions? That is erpsupport@ddaftech.com.
Yes.
And I'll be including that in the follow-up email as well. So everybody will receive that in your follow-up.
Mhm.
And also, Kathy asks, when is the custom field information populated with actual data?
When is the custom field dimension populated with actual data? So custom fields are populated with custom data when you create the custom field. So let's just say, for example, you're creating a pick list like I had created. So at the time that you're creating that field, you will select your pick list values. Then when you create your dimension, I'm going to assume that this field is being put onto my dimension. When I'm adding a new event, in this case, I would say this event, and then I'd find that custom field and I would select a value in that custom field, or I would check the box, or I would type into the text box. So you're populating that custom field or the values for that custom field at the time that you are working inside of your dimension. It doesn't have to be on creation of the dimension, although it might if it was required. It just at some point you as an individual would come in and populate that piece of data. It's not typically populated through any activities like creation of a journal entry wouldn't cause the population into a custom field. However, for those of us that are advanced users on the call, there are ways that you could utilize smart events or triggers to have something that's happening in a custom field trigger something that's happening in the system to trigger a value into that custom field. So I don't know, Kathy, if that answers your question specifically, but the field in the custom field is populated at the time that you create the custom field, and then you can add the values on the dimension at any point.
Excellent, thank you. Another one that has come in from Lisa is there an example of a report using custom fields that didn't need to be chosen at the transaction level?
So I guess the question is like if it's like set up like on the like on a vendor card, like is that kind of what she's asking? Like if it was just like on a like just an example of a report for something that I don't have anything specifically built, Lisa, but it sounds like what you're looking for is like we could run a custom report if we had, I'm going to pick on something like a Christmas card list, right? Or a holiday card list. So if you have a vendor a bunch of customers that you're working with, and you put a checkbox on the customer card record that says is opted into holiday card disbursement. You can have the check marks on there, and then you can actually run a query. So you can do a couple of different ways. You could do a view where you say, I want to show a list of everyone that has that box checked. You could also create a dimension structure where you say, show me all of my vendors where they have that have the W-9s have been submitted, or anybody where these values meet the credentials. So it doesn't necessarily have to be on the transaction. It could be on the customer record, on the vendor record, on the AR header. So just depending on what you're looking for, you might have had different reporting requirements, and they don't all have to be financial reports. They could be custom reports or even views in the system.
Thanks. Also, she had a follow-up to that. So when we're creating these custom fields and dimensions, obviously there won't be data related to those until you actually get in and start using those. Mm-hmm. So is there a way to go back and populate some of that data for use in reporting?
Yes. So it depends again on what she's trying to do. Like if we had a custom field that was, Sage is never retroactive. So if she's created a new field and wants to include that in, the field will become available on all of the old transactions. It's just probably not going to be populated, or it will default to the value that that you've selected when you created that. So there's different ways that you can approach it depending on what those fields are. So Lisa, if you want to send in a ticket into the help email, and I'm going to actually share, let me just go ahead. We could still ask questions, but I'm going to just go over to this slide. This is my email address. So you can actually send me an example of what you're doing, and we could tell you what would be the steps to update those values depending on the type of custom field you'd be doing.
Appreciate that, Tabitha. So that is all that has come in right now. So I'll do one last call for questions.
I will say while we're waiting on questions, I really think that custom fields are a great way for you to try something new without the worry about breaking the system. So you can always add a custom field, and unless you're saying it's required, most people probably won't even notice that you put it there. So you can add that custom field. You can try out populating that field and try out building a report based on that field without affecting functionality. And I think that it's a great way to start stretching your personal confidence inside of the system.
Great. Well, I think that wraps up our questions. And so that'll also wrap up our session today. Thank you, Tabitha, so much for being with us and sharing your knowledge. Everyone, thank you for joining us today. And again, we'll have that support email address in the follow-up email. So if you think of any other questions, please feel free to contact us, and have a fantastic rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.